I'm going to take you through all the steps of processing peonies, from picking them off of the plant to shipping them off in a box to whoever is going to order peonies. I provide peonies for weddings and different events, or just give them away to people for birthdays. Anyway, they're just a gorgeous flower that have a lot of uses. I have a lot of varieties here. I've got about 200 plants and about 10 different varieties, colors ranging from white to blush corals, light pinks, all the way to dark reds. My favorite ones are, I've kind of got a workhorse in my farm, which is a peony here called Kilcher, and it's really the workhorse of my farm. I get the most buds out of these plants, and they're kind of the most sellable of my varieties. And so right now the buds are just almost ready to pick, but they're really hard and we need to have them soften up a little bit before picking. So I've got one bud ready to pick right now. So I'm going to go from my first bud through the whole season once the flowers start coming in, and I'm picking hundreds at once. Going to show you that too. This is the first bud that's pickable in my entire field. This is my Kilcher plant, which is my most prolific bloomer. So the things that I'm looking for in a bud is just a bit of opening where you've got the sepals starting to come open, and you also start showing the real color of the flower. This is going to be a light pink, and you can see on some of these, they're just still a very pale, almost greenish pink. And so you want to see that real color starting, and then we've got just a little bit of lift on the petals. So this is going to be a perfect bud to store in the cooler and then ship through the mail. So the reason that we pick them so tight is so that they are shippable. Once they're put in the cooler, they'll stay at this stage. They won't open any further. You can actually prolong the life of the peony for quite a few weeks before shipping them out. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this, which is pretty exciting. This is the first bud of the season. And what you do is you cut down, you leave at least 2 rows of leaves on the plant, so that when you're removing the stalk, you're not taking away all of the foliage and the plant can keep doing its thing. So I just cut at the top of that leaf knob, and there is my first stem. Happy to have my first flower. I'm going to show you the difference in several types of buds here. This is a Kilcher bud. It's nice and tight and round. It makes a really good bud to ship through the mail. You want to pick it a little bit hard for shipping. And then here I've got another variety where it looks much more open. You would think that this one would be ready to pick and ready to open, but actually this bud, even though you see a lot of the flower already and the petals and the color, it has to be very floppy before it'll open. If I pick these things too tight, they won't even open. So these ones, even though they look a little more ready, these are actually not ready to pick. My peonies are really getting going now, and I'm going to have a big pick today. I can tell just because there's a lot that are starting to open. And since my first pick of one bud, every day I've just had a few more. Yesterday I picked about 50, and so I bet today I'll pick quite a few more. And we've had kind of crappy weather, so it's taking a toll on a lot of my plants. They're flopping over. I'm hoping to get some nicer weather now where it's not raining, and I can just speed through here and pick a bunch of peonies. This bud is one that I'm going to pick, and what I'm looking for is a certain amount of openness, these sepals pulled away a bit, and then one of the actual petals starting to lift. Also, we want to have a pink color where you're starting to see the true color of the flower. Right now this is a little bit pale, but as I pick, I'm going to point out some that are pinker. Right now this is still a good stage to pick. I'll refrigerate this flower, and then it'll be able to keep for weeks if we needed it to, before an order comes in to ship it out. And then when I pick flowers, you leave 2 of the true leaves on the stalk, just to keep the plant going after you've picked off most of its foliage, and there's a perfectly beautiful bud. So I'm going to go through. I've got a lot here that look like they're going to be ready. I do have some weird buds that aren't as desirable. Sometimes when we get buds that aren't formed well, we just sell them at the local farmer's market because once they open, they're really beautiful anyway, but they don't look so great as a bud. Here's an example of one that's formed kind of strange. It's got the petals sort of poking up into a point. It's going to turn into a beautiful flower just like the rest, but the florist might not be as happy with it as these nice rounder buds. This one is perfect. It's got some lift here on the petals. The sepals have lifted out, leaving 2 leaves. I'll go through these rows about 3 times a day looking for flowers that are ready, and I'll pick each side of the rows. Right now I'm just going through this row. Sometimes I can reach the stuff that's on either side. Sometimes I just leave it till I come back around. Right now I have a lot of rain damage to my plants with these stems are just flopping over. I'm going to try to be really careful while I'm walking through here that I'm not stepping on buds. What I'm starting to do is actually tie up the base of the plant to lift those up so that they're not getting damaged by flopping around on the ground. Some of these are just a little bit tight and not quite pink enough, so I'll leave them. I'll probably be picking them a little later in the day. Here's one that's nice and pink. That one's ready to go. Right now I'm just picking this variety. It's called a Kilcher, and it's a really beautiful light pink kind of blush flower. Really nice for weddings. It's my most prolific flower, so it's also my earliest flower, so I'm picking it first. There are a few other varieties that are ready. I have 1 or 2 flowers from other varieties that are ready, but mostly I'm just concentrating on this one. The importance of flowers are not just so that brides can have something beautiful at their wedding. Flowers are important to the plant because it's how they actually get pollinated. It's how they reproduce. So plants produce flowers to do a reproduction cycle so that it continues the species. And flowers are really showy, or they smell good, or they have different features that attract a pollinator so that they can pollinate. The pollinator comes, gets the pollen from that flower and then takes it to the next flower, and so you've got your pollination. So the reason that flowers are beautiful is not just for our enjoyment, but it's actually to attract pollinators. So here's a perfectly nice, this one is really, really pink, really open. This is very ready to pick. So this is just my first pile. I'm gonna lay them here. Actually, what I'm gonna do is wash these guys off a little bit. They get spots from flies that I need to clean off, and so even though it's been raining, I still need to clean them. You can see some of these little spots here that I'm gonna have to clean off. And if I spray them off with the hose, it just makes it a lot easier. By doing this pre-wash, it really takes a lot of the time out of the cleaning. When I've done it without rinsing it like this, you just have to kind of work away at the little spots, and this way they're ready to come right off. So it's worth doing this step. You'd think with all the rain we had, I wouldn't have to do this. But. Shake some of the water off. So I'm just going to let some of these stand in buckets. So I'm going to start with this clump. So this is the first step after picking and rinsing them off. The first step in preparing them is to pick off these tiny little growths that are at the base of the leaf, and then take off any extra leaves that are lower down, just leaving 3 leaves on each stem. This is the first step that I do just quickly, and then I'll go through and look at each flower and actually clean off fly spots and whatnot. I found that if I do this process, it's sort of faster to just concentrate on one activity at a time. Otherwise, it is kind of a slow process to clean and inspect each peony and get it to the right shape. After I've cleaned up the stems and the leaves, then I concentrate on the bud, and there's always just a little bit of gunk that you want to wash off. The bud is always creating sap, and so the rain is washing a lot of that away, but the sap sort of collects and creates this black gunk that you want to get rid of. And then if there's any fly specks on it, because you've got flies landing on these all the time. It looks like my pre-wash has taken off the fly specks, but anyway, I just go over these with a cotton ball, get rid of any last little problems, and then call that guy good. It's ready to go. I think I harvest about 1,000 flowers, and so I'll be doing that 1,000 times. I always set up a little tent over my operation just because you never know if it's going to be too sunny or too rainy. So far it's mostly been too rainy, not enough sunshine. And then I also have my, my little camper that Jane and I made on one of our episodes of Alaska, the Last Frontier. Anyway, I love it. The grandkids love it. They come in here and they have little tea parties. You can see they're set up with the teacups. Jane and I had so much fun building this and then taking it on camping trips. We drug this thing to Hope and Seward, and we drug it to Whittier even. Jane was teaching me how to fish. That didn't go so well. I've got some soul searching to do, I feel like, on this trip. Oh, I got it!
You got one?
Nice and easy.
I'll go get the net!
Start reeling on it now.
Charlotte, let's hear it go cussing.
I don't even know what I'm doing. Am I rolling it?
You're fine.
Come on.
Oh
You
my
got
God.
it.
Here it is.
Let it go out. Okay, we're good.
That's the first fish I've ever caught with a pole. I can't even believe it. Poor thing. Okay, all right, I did it. Anyway, then we made like a little kitchen area. So when I'm out here doing my peonies, I can have my little cocktail or coffee or whatever suits the mood. And when I have the grandkids over, they have a place to play. So it just makes a nice little camp. This is my summer camp where I do my peony processing. And it's just so nice out here. I share the area with a lot of golden crowned sparrows. And so throughout my peony picking season, they're raising their chicks. They're raiding my garden over here. They just jump all over the place in here, and they look for bugs, and they prune some of my my vegetable leaves. They really like the Swiss chard. You can see some places where they've eaten away at the chard plants, but I figure I can share my crop with some beautiful golden crowned sparrows. So that's really fun for me to have the birds out here with me. This is kind of my happy camp in the summertime. All right, that's the last pick of the day. I'm gonna put these in the cooler and then take a bunch of these to town. I'm going to load this cooler up to take into town to the pack house, and so I put an ice block in here, cover it up with a towel, and then I'm just going to start loading up the petchers. So the petchers are the flower that I have the most of. I have some kind of crazy colored ones here, but mainly I'm concentrating on getting the petchers down to the pack house today. We built this little shed around my cooler so that I would have a working space and be out of the weather, and it would protect the cooler also just from sun and rain and the elements, but it's kind of cramped. That's about all I can put in this one. So I'll put this in my car. One more cooler to go. So that's all Petchers in there. I'm gonna make a layer of some whites that I'm also bringing in. We've seriously got an actual wedding and a funeral to supply flowers to, so. One more white that I'm bringing in that might be good for the wedding or the funeral. Okay, so that is a wrap. Now I'll drive these guys to the pack house and check them in. Into the stacks. We'll see you at the pack house. So here I am at the co-op, and I'm just going to be emptying my coolers and sorting them out into these crates, which is the way that they're stored. And cold flowers here. So I need to size these guys. We sort them by size. All right, once I've got one of these crates full, I just bring it into the pack house cooler. And voila. Here's some of my flowers at the pack house now. More load of peonies bound for the co-op. I'm finally done picking peonies pretty much. My season is over. I've got a lot of flowers that have blown out that I didn't pick for various reasons. Some flowers are just not really nice enough to send to a florist. Maybe they're sitting weird on the stem. So I'm just gonna go through now and pick some of the last flowers. I also just clean them up here. Like these ones have gotten damaged from rain. They're just yucky now. I just throw away the damaged flowers, get them out of here so that there isn't just a bunch of petals and mold starting in the plot. But all of these whites, they're really pretty flower, but they're usually crooked on the stem, and so I don't pick a lot of them to sell or even give away. But there are a couple here that I've just left. They're smaller buds that aren't as desirable, again, crooked on the stem, so I'm just leaving some of them here. My most popular flower, this beautiful blush pale pink, these buds are just so small. I didn't even pick them. I'm just letting them blow out. And then it ends up looking kind of pretty. Anyway, I'm happy that peony season is over. My work is done for the season. Other than just trying to maintain the bushes, get rid of some of the rain damaged flowers and clean it up a little bit. Then later in the fall, when all of this vegetation goes brown, I'll be cutting back the stalks, and I'll just end up with a field with stubble on the ground. So that's another step later in the fall. But right now I'm just gonna enjoy the peonies sitting out here. Don't really have to pick anymore. But one thing I'm gonna do today is harvest some of the petals off of the flowers that have blown open, because they're still useful for making jam and mead. Peony petals flavor the mead and the jam, and they also can add a pretty pink color. And so I'm gonna go ahead and make use of some of these flowers that have just blown open in the sunshine. So I'm gonna just go through and do some petal harvesting. This one is called a Petcher. Usually it's got a little more pink in it. This one has faded in the sun, and so you can hardly see any of the pink right now. It's just a really light blush. These are really tiny buds of the Petcher. So these aren't the ones that I really pick commercially. I've just let them blow out on the plant. Same with this. This would have been a really small bud that I just even avoided picking. This is a really beautiful flower. It's called a Shawnee Chief, and it's a gorgeous deep red that, again, isn't the greatest commercial flower because it's got this open top. It doesn't have a nice closed bud, which makes them more desirable for shipping, but it's a really gorgeous flower. And this one here is called a President Roosevelt. And when it opens, it's just huge layers of beautiful magenta. I'll show an example of that later on an open one. This one right here is a coral, and it's faded in the sunshine. It's really light right now. I can show you what the corals look like when they're just opening. They're just a deep, gorgeous coral. This is one of the prettier colors, I think, of the peonies. This flower right here is called an Immaculée, and it opens with just the slightest bit of blush on these rounded petals, and then the inside has a bunch of fluffy yellower petals in the middle there. You can see one here that's a lot more open. It's a little bit stringy the way that it's grown upwards because it's sitting down like that. Usually these would be standing up more straight, but it's quite a pretty flower, especially if you put these ones in a bouquet and you have them stacked together with that pale outer, slightly pink blush outer petals, it makes a really pretty flower in bridal bouquets. So this one is called an Adolphe Rousseau. It's just got that gorgeous deep magenta, and then the yellow stamens in the middle are super contrasty, and it's a really fun flower to put in vases. Again, it's not a super popular commercial flower because it's got this open top bud. Again, not the greatest for shipping, but ends up really gorgeous if you have them for more of a local bouquet with that really contrasty magenta and yellow. We've got a couple more really cool types up here. So this one is called a something like Breathauer or Brettenauer. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's one of my most gorgeous flowers. It just opens and opens and opens with layers and layers and layers of slightly blush to white petals that are just endless. It really is the most gorgeous, stunning flower that I have. It ends up with these really long stems. I've got to put it in the cages to support the stems. Otherwise, they really go all crooked and whatnot. But that is an absolutely gorgeous flower. Well, that's the end of the tour of all of my varieties. So let's go and harvest some petals. I'm going to collect the petals off of this flower. This crazy thing is called a Henry Boxtos, and it's just this giant red flower. These ones are getting a little bit old here, and I'm going to collect the petals before I jostle it around and they just fall on the ground. But you can see this is an older one. The petals are just falling off, so I'm collecting these for making mead and jam. It adds a nice flavor, a peony petal flavor. And then here you can see a flower that's not quite as mature. It's still opening, but it opens into this giant bomb of petals, and those are just amazing flowers. They would make a good bouquet for maybe a giant hotel entryway or something. They're just so huge. It's hard to imagine how you even use them. Anyway, this one has some damaged petals. I'm just going to get the good stuff off of here. Some of those are a little dry, but the darker petals end up giving more color to whatever you're making. If you're doing jam or mead, they add a nice little pink color to it. And the white varieties have a little bit more of a sweet scent to them. And so it's nice to use a combo of the red petals and white petals when you're using them for flavorings. This variety is called a Sarah Bernhardt, and this is the classic pink peony that you see in a lot of artwork. It's in a lot of Chinese paintings. Way back in the day, peonies originated in Asia, and you often see them in artwork. So this is just that typical, super pink, gorgeous, fluffy peony called a Sarah Bernhardt.